Hi, welcome to a quick video here talking about Pearl Harbor. This is for NCTA course. We'll be looking at Pearl Harbor from kind of the Japanese point of view as far as examining why things happened and what happened. Alright, so first thing to talk about is before the U.S. gets involved in the war, the U.S. said we're neutral, we're not taking sides, we're staying out of things. Which, looking at their actions from the Japanese point of view, this would be seen as kind of a blatant lie. The United States was selling all sorts of supplies, specifically needed ones like oil and rubber and things like that, to the Allies, but they stopped selling to Japan. The U.S. gives 50 warships to Great Britain. Now this is part of a land lease deal, but from the Japanese point of view, here's 50 warships. The fact that these were more or less mothballed ships that were obsolete really kind of gets ignored, and whether it should be or not, that's seen as a big violation of this neutrality. The U.S. is selling stuff, loaning stuff, straight up giving things to the Allies, but not doing the same thing for Japan or the Axis powers. Not only that, the U.S. takes it a step farther and they actively try and discourage other countries from trading with Japan and other Axis powers. So you can see from the Japanese point of view that the U.S. is very much involved in World War II, and they very clearly picked a side. They're not neutral. And if it was just this, there might not have been a Pearl Harbor. But there's also, you have to realize the threat from Japan's point of view. The U.S. had a considerable military presence, notable one at least, on the Philippines. The U.S. had a military presence on Guam, part of the CNMI. Sorry, part of the NMI. It's a typo. The U.S. is gathering a huge fleet in the Pacific at Hawaii. So from Japan's point of view, they're kind of being encircled here by the American military. And then there's the threat that the U.S. poses in other ways. The U.S. is the only country with a strong fleet in the Pacific Ocean. They're the only one that can challenge Japan. The U.S. is incredibly industrialized. A large number of factories producing hundreds, possibly thousands of cars every week in the United States that could be switched over to tanks, machine guns, landing crafts, battleships, whatever, very quickly. In fact, I believe it was Honeywell was one of the big companies that was able to switch over very quickly. The U.S. is very rich, has lots of technology, lots of resources. This makes them a big threat if they join the war, especially if the U.S. has time to build everything and prepare before the war starts. The U.S. military in the Pacific could cut off supplies of the Japanese. Japanese are spreading out throughout the Pacific, taking different islands. And if the U.S. fleet comes in, they can cut off those supply lines, which could cause some serious problems. So from the Japanese point of view, the U.S. is more or less this powerful snake that's poised and ready to strike. So we've got kind of four main reasons that some people in Japan were looking at as far as why should we attack the U.S., specifically at Pearl Harbor. The U.S. has a long history of friendship with the Allies. In fact, they were with the Allies. Sorry, I have a little bit of typo issue there. With the Allies during World War I. I mean, granted, so was Japan at that point, but the U.S. wants control of the Pacific. They took the Philippines from Spain. They've got Hawaii. They've got Guam. They're expanding into the Pacific. And if you have Japan expanding one way, the U.S. expanding the other way, eventually that's going to cause a problem. Plus, everything else from the last 3 slides. So when I cover this PowerPoint with my students during cultural studies, we look at, from Japan's point of view, you can definitely see some strong reasons why they would consider the U.S. an enemy or a threat at this point. So why attack at that point? Why December 7th? Which, of course, wouldn't be December 7th Japanese time, but whatever. If the U.S. has time to prepare, if they're able to join the war on their terms, if they're able to make additional warships, additional tanks, equip all their people, train all their people, and then come into the war when the U.S. wants to. The U.S. is able to dictate when they enter the war. They're going to be an incredibly powerful force. And it looks like they're going to join the war. There's this belief that the United States doesn't have the stomach for a costly war. So if you can get them involved before they're prepared, it's going to cause the cost to go up. People aren't going to be as trained. The death toll is going to be higher. And that will cause the U.S. to pull out faster. There's this belief that the U.S. are a bunch of rich, spoiled, fat, lazy, whatever people. And if you look at 41 and 40, it looked very much like the Allies were losing the war, and the war could be over in a matter of months. So you've got World War II. It looks like it's this close to ending, but if the United States comes in, that's going to change, and it could draw out the war for years. But that's if the U.S. comes in on their own terms. So the idea is attack them now, before they're ready, and maybe we can prevent this from happening. The attack, from the Japanese point of view, is a very, very successful attack. We've got 6 Japanese aircraft carriers coming with over 350 different planes. They're able to sink or damage 8 different battleships, 8 other Navy warships destroyed, 188 planes destroyed, over 2,400 Americans killed, plus those wounded. They destroy supply areas, buildings, power stations, all sorts of stuff. And Japan, on the other hand, only loses 29 planes. 5 mini-subs, 65 soldiers die, and 1 soldier is captured. So from a Japanese point of view, this is a very successful attack. It's going to take the U.S. a very long time to build up the fleet to get it to kind of the pre-December 7th numbers. By the way, when I show that slide afterwards, I love to show a little clip from horrible, horrible movie, but great scenes in the movie Pearl Harbor. I think a critic once described that movie as a love triangle that gets interrupted by World War II. But great scenes on the attack, and how a lot of soldiers and a lot of Americans were just they couldn't process what was happening, which really slowed down the response. Whether that's true or not, the visuals are quite stunning. So here is what Japan owns after Pearl Harbor. We're looking just months after Pearl Harbor. Japan has expanded even more. And there's your little look at possible reasons why Japan would target Hawaii on December 7th.